Thousands of Scots every day commute across central Scotland into Edinburgh and Glasgow. Could the First Minister explain to them why a car park tax imposed on them by a local authority whose politicians they don't elect and in whose region they don't live is a good example of local decision-making?
First Minister.
Of course, this would be a discretionary power for councils, a power that under a Tory government councils in England already have, and the kind of localism that Tories have been demanding in this chamber for some time. But I noted that Jackson Carlaw launched a campaign in Edinburgh this morning, and he's mentioned Edinburgh in his question, which I thought was really interesting, because you see, just a few months ago, there was a motion passed at the Transport Committee of Edinburgh City Council. It said this: to note the merits and principle of pursuing the power for Edinburgh to introduce a workplace parking levy. It was tabled by Councillor Nick Cook, Conservative, seconded by Councillor Scott Douglas, Conservative, and voted for by Councillor Graham Bruce, Conservative. Would Jackson Carlaw care to explain that, how can I put this delicately, inconsistency?
Jackson Carlaw.
The First Minister wants to talk about Edinburgh City Council. Tory councillors noted the need for an economic assessment, First Minister. What the entire country has noted is that you want to impose a £500 car park tax on them with no assessment whatsoever. So, do I support a back-of-the-fag packet policy that threatens low workers with a regressive tax? No, I do not. Does the First Minister not understand what this means to ordinary people across Scotland? This is the equivalent to many people's monthly rent. So I assume from the First Minister's answer that she is now the cheerleader-in-chief for people being punished for going to work with no say, far less a vote over that decision. But the SNP's position on the car park tax is more confused than that. On Wednesday, SNP Minister Kate Forbes said this: a key principle born of Adam Smith is that taxes should be proportionate to the ability to pay. Can the First Minister explain how this entirely admirable principle, which has so rightly inspired Kate Forbes, is even remotely met if a call centre worker earning less than £20,000 a year has to pay the same car park tax as a company director earning 5 times as much?
First Minister.
Jackson Carlaw well knows the SNP government would not impose anything on anybody. This is a discretionary power that councils in England already have. It would be a proposed levy that councils could propose on employers, not employees. And this is what the Tories used to believe. We believe that decisions should be taken as locally as possible and that power should lie with politicians elected as locally as possible. I'm not sure when they changed their minds on that. But, you know, I've been wondering if there was a reason other than naked hypocrisy for the Tories' position on this. And I wonder if it might be something to do with this. Just at the end of last year, the Tories on Angus Council introduced car parking charges at 33 public car parks in Carnoustie, Arbroath, Forfar, Kirriemuir, Brecon and Montrose. On Eastern Bartonshire Council, the Tories last year increased car parking charges and they scrapped free parking. And in Argyll and Bute Council, the Tories imposed on car parks in Arica an 800% increase in car parking. So here we have it, Presiding Officer. The Tories don't want to give powers to councils because clearly the Tories don't trust Tory councils.
Jackson Carlaw.
So it's the Henry McLeish defence. It wasn't me, it was a councillor what done it. But you are responsible, First Minister, because you and the SNP MSPs are going to vote for it this afternoon. Yeah. And every single Scottish Conservative Council Group leader has now emphatically said they will not support a car park tax in their area. And every single Scottish Conservative MSP will oppose the car park tax in their constituency or region. But what about the First Minister? She's a constituency MSP in Glasgow. So what's her view? If, as a result of powers voted for by SNP MSPs, the SNP leadership of Glasgow City Council proposed charging hundreds of pounds each year for workplace parking, would she support them? Yes or no?
First Minister.
That is up to local councils to do the assessment and to make the case. That presumably is what you mean by decisions taken as locally as possible and power lying with politicians elected as locally as possible. But I just want to, get to the heart. Let's get to the heart of the Tory position here. The Tory position, as I understand it, is if the SNP government devolve a tax to councils and councils decide to use that power, that becomes an SNP government tax. So can I ask Jackson Carlaw, is it the case that given that the Tory government devolved income tax powers to the Scottish government, is the Scottish government's use of those powers a Tory tax? Because that sounds ridiculous, but that is the logic of the Tory position. So this afternoon in the budget debate, I look forward to all of us calling the income tax decisions of this Scottish government a Tory tax. That's the logic of Jackson Carlaw.
Jackson Carlaw.
So bluntly, it sounds as if the First Minister doesn't know if she's in favour of her own policy being imposed on her own constituents by her own SNP council. Presiding Officer, we will oppose the budget deal when it comes before Parliament this afternoon, and frankly, SNP members should too, as it breaks their own manifesto promises on both the council tax and on the basic rate of income tax. As we learned earlier this week, it risks precious tax revenue, which pays for our schools and hospitals being lost to Scotland as people take their money elsewhere. And worst of all, it is a tax that says to people across this country, trying to do the right thing, trying to juggle school drop-offs with work, trying to keep Scotland going, and in many cases working unsociable hours when there is no public transport provision, that they are to be punished. All week we've seen SNP ministers desperately distance themselves from the car park tax, and now even the First Minister won't say whether she backs it or not. It's a simple question. If they don't back it, why should anybody? Why should we?
First Minister.
I back councils having the power to decide, because we don't just preach localism and empowering councils, we practice that principle. A discretionary power that councils could use to help tackle pollution, cut emissions and, yes, invest in public transport. And I say again, Presiding Officer, exactly the localism that Tories have been demanding and exactly the power that a UK Tory government allows councils in England to already have. Isn't it the case, Presiding Officer, that I've got a wealth of evidence, I've gone through some of it here today, that the Tories do not oppose giving this power to councils in principle. They only actually oppose it when it is the SNP proposing it. It is, Presiding Officer, to coin a phrase, hypocrisy on stilts. And I hope that Jackson Carlaw had more success when he used to sell second-hand cars than he'll have in peddling that line.